consists of gray and white matter, and gray matter that is pallium, gray matter on the surface of hemisphere, cortex of hemisphere, then renencephalon, and what else? Basal nuclei. If we cut in horizontal plane this place, look here, what is it, this structure? That is thalamus. That is thalamus, and here it is cortex of what? Insula. Clear? Look here. Here it is thalamus. That is thalamus. And here it is cortex of insula. That is cortex of insula. And now, if we make here, if we cut this place of hemisphere, we will see inside that is nucleus caudatus, that is head of nucleus caudatus, body and tail. And if we cut here, we will see head of nucleus caudatus, this one. And inside of this place, we will see the same nucleus lymphiformis and claustrum. Gray matter between nucleus lymphiformis and cortex of insula. This is white matter, that is white matter, and this is gray matter, that is basal nuclei. And we have three basal nuclei. First basal nucleus, that is corpus striatum. Corpus striatum consists of nucleus caudatus and nucleus lymphiformis. Why it is first basal nuclei? Why it is not two nuclei? It is first or one basal nuclei. Because if we continues to cut brain in ventral part of hemisphere, caudate nucleus and nucleus lymphiformis, they join together. That is why in ventral part that is one gray matter, and in dorsal direction white matter insert between nucleus caudatus and nucleus lymphiformis, and we can see two nuclei. Clear it is. That is why first basal nucleus, that is corpus striatum. Corpus striatum. And corpus striatum consists of nucleus caudatus, number 1, and nucleus lymphiformis, number 2. And nucleus lymphiformis, with the help of white matter, separates into 3 parts. This and these 2 medial parts, number 3, I put here number 3. That is globus pallidus. One again, number 2, nucleus lymphiformis consists of globus pallidus, and this peripheral part, number 4, that is putamen. And number 1, that is nucleus caudatus. One again, first basal nucleus, corpus striatum, consists of caudate nucleus and nucleus lymphiformis. And nucleus lymphiformis consists of globus pallidus, that is 2 medial parts, and peripheral part, that is putamen. Second basal nucleus, that is claustrum. I put here number 5. Number 5, that is next basal nucleus, that is claustrum. And third basal nucleus, impossible to see in this diagram because it is here in temporal lobe, in anterior part. If we cut temporal lobe here, inside of temporal lobe we will see gray matter, And this nucleus is amygdaloid body, corpus amygdaloidum, that is part of the limbic system. That is last basal nucleus, that is corpus amygdaloidum. Amygdaloid body. 3 basal nuclei in hemisphere: corpus striatum, claustrum, and corpus amygdaloidum. That is basal nuclei. Next, white matter. White matter consists of 3 types of fibers. First type, that is white matter, which is joined structures in one hemisphere. That is associated fibers. And these fibers subdivides into into 2 groups, short and long. Short associated fibers are fibra arcuata cerebri. Fibra arcuata cerebri join nearest gyri joined together with the help of fibra arcuata cerebri. And long associated fibers, for example, bundle which is start from frontal lobe, continues to parietal and finished in occipital. That is fasciculus longitudinalis superior. Another long fibers, that is fasciculus longitudinalis, help me, inferior. It starts from temporal lobe and continues to occipital. Next, fasciculus uncinatus. It starts from frontal lobe, goes to parietal and finished in temporal. Fasciculus uncinatus. And last, that is cingulum. And cingulum is inside of gyrus fornicatus. White matter inside of gyrus fornicatus has name cingulum, and that is last long associated fibers. Next type of fibers, that is commissural fibers. That is white matter which is joined right and left hemisphere, one hemisphere with opposite hemisphere. And largest commissural fibers, that is what? Largest commissura, that is corpus callosum. Corpus callosum joined the same structures in opposite hemisphere. For example, what is this gyrus? Gyrus precentralis in right hemisphere through corpus callosum, joined with the same gyrus with gyrus precentralis in left side. Gyrus postcentralis with gyrus postcentralis. Lobulus parietalis superior with lobulus parietalis superior. Corresponding structures in opposite hemisphere joined together with the help of corpus callosum. And corpus callosum consists of knee of corpus callosum, that is genu corporis callosi. Genu corporis callosi continues into rostrum. Here it is rostrum corporis callosi. Here it is trunk, truncus corporis callosi, and finished with splenium corporis callosi. That is part of corpus callosum. Rostrum, genu, trunk, splenium. That is first commissural fiber. Second, that is anterior commissura of the brain. Commissura cerebri anterior. This commissura joined together olfactory lobe in right and left hemisphere. Commissura cerebri anterior. And last commissura, that is commissura fornicis. Okay, this white structure, that is fornix. Anteriorly fornix continues into columna fornicis and finished in corpora mammillaria. And posteriorly fornix goes to hypocamp, that is crura fornicis, and crura fornicis goes to hypocamp and makes fimbria hippocampi. And now, right and left fornix, that is right, and here it is left fornix, joined together with the help of commissura fornicis. And commissura fornicis is help to join right and left hypocamp. 3 commissural fibers: corpus callosum, commissura cerebri anterior, and commissura fornicis. And last type of white matter, that is projectional fibers. Projectional fibers, they start from hemisphere and goes to another departments of brain or goes to the spinal cord. And all projectional fibers pass through internal capsule. Look here, this white matter in space between caudate nucleus, nucleus lentiformis, and thalamus, that is white matter here, here, and here. This white matter has name internal capsule. I put here 5, 6, what is 6? Cortex of insula, 7 that is thalamus, 8 that is internal capsule, 9 that is white matter between putamen and claustrum, this white matter that is external capsule, and number 10 white matter in space between claustrum and cortex of insula, that is capsula extrema, most external capsule, capsula extrema. And now, I already said that all projectional fibers pass through internal capsule. Internal capsule consists of anterior crus, knee of internal capsule, and posterior crus. Anterior crus has 2 tracts. Letter A, that is tractus frontopontinus. Frontopontinus. Do you remember midbrain? And if you remember letter A, that is tractus frontopontinus. Do you remember what is this tract? No, this is cortica nuclearis, here it is cortica spinalis, and here it is accipita parietal pontinus. Okay. And now, letter A, that is tractus frontopontinus, the same right here. Letter B, tractus cortico-thalamicus, from brain cortex to thalamus, cortico-thalamicus, or it is the same frontothalamicus. That is, it is possible to call this tract cortico-thalamicus or frontothalamicus. Both names are correct. Then, in knee of internal capsule, letter C. C, that is tractus cortico-nuclearis. Next, in posterior crus, letter D. That is tractus cortico-spinalis. Letter E. Tractus thalamo-corticalis. Letter B was corticothalamicus, and here it is tractus thalamo-corticalis. F. Tractus accipita tempora parietal pontinus. G. That is central auditory tract. And letter H, central optic tract. They are projectional fibers which pass through internal capsule. This diagram, basal nuclei and internal capsule with all tracts, you should draw next time. That is white matter. Now, lateral ventricle. Cavitas in hemisphere has name lateral ventricle, ventriculus lateralis. In left hemisphere, first ventricle, in right hemisphere, second ventricle, And third ventricle you already know in diencephalon. Each lateral ventricle has 3 horns and central part. In frontal lobe, this blue color, that is anterior horn. Cornu anterior, that is anterior horn. Then in parietal lobe, here it is central part. In occipital lobe, posterior horn. And in temporal lobe, this one is inferior horn. One again, anterior, posterior and inferior horns, and central part. Anterior horn, lateral wall, that is head of nucleus caudatus, that is laterally, and medially, that is transparent septum, septum pellucidum in Latin. This septum, that is white matter in space between genu corporis callosi and columna fornicis, that is septum pellucidum, and this septum, it separates anterior horn of one ventricle from anterior horn of opposite ventricle. Next, central part, floor or inferior wall of the central part, that is dorsal surface of thalamus, and body of nucleus caudatus, and superiorly corpus callosum. Corpus callosum is superior wall for anterior horn and central part. Next, posterior horn. Medial wall of posterior horn has eminence from this groove. Who remember what is this groove? Sulcus calcarinus. And sulcus calcarinus, it presses to the medial wall of posterior horn and makes here calcar avis, that is eminence on the medial wall of posterior horn. And superior wall, that is white fibers from corpus callosum, they has name tapetum. Inferior horn. Inferior horn, it is laterally we can see tail of nucleus caudatus, medially that is hypocamp, and inferiorly that is eminentia collateralis. And this eminentia makes with the help of sulcus collateralis on inferior surface. This sulcus makes eminentia collateralis on the floor of inferior horn, and superiorly tapetum, the same like in posterior horn. And inferior horn, the same like central part, has plexus choroideus, and you already know that plexus choroideus, it's participate in telechoroidea, and telechoroidea produce cerebrospinal fluid. And cerebrospinal fluid from lateral ventricle goes to third ventricle through what? No. What is the name of opening between lateral and third ventricles? Foramen interventriculare. Interventricular foramen. Foramen interventriculare. From third ventricle, cerebrospinal fluid pass through cerebral what? Aqueduct, and goes to fourth ventricle. From fourth ventricle, one way for cerebrospinal fluid, it can goes to the central canal, but central canal in spinal cord, it is blind. That is why from central canal, cerebrospinal fluid, it can goes backward, only goes to fourth ventricle, and how cerebrospinal fluid leaves fourth ventricle through 3 openings in the roof of the fourth ventricle. Who remember names of these openings? Apertura mediana ventriculi quarti, it is unpaired, and apertura lateralis ventriculi quarti, they are paired. 3 openings, and through these 3 openings, cerebrospinal fluid goes to subarachnoid space. And how cerebrospinal fluid leaves subarachnoid space? Who can answer? How cerebrospinal fluid leaves subarachnoid space? Who remember? That is bones of the skull, and it is dura mater. And do you remember what we have between dura mater and bones here? What is this space? Between bone and dura mater. That is sinuses of dura mater. And this sinuses has venous blood, deoxygenated blood. And cerebrospinal fluid, it goes into these sinuses and it mixed with venous blood and leaves skull together with blood. And now you already know these sinuses because in previous semester when you discuss veins of the human body, you already said about sinuses. Now I only repeat it for you. For example, that is bones of the skull roof, and here it is dura mater. And it makes falx cerebri. Okay, that is this structure. That is falx cerebri. This falx take place in space between right and left hemisphere. Here it is. In this place we have falx cerebri. Clear it is. And if you remember, that is vertebral canal, and that is dura mater in vertebral canal. Oh, here it is brain, that is spinal cord. Here it is pia mater, and here it is arachnoid. And if you remember, between vertebral canal and dura mater, what we have? What is this space? Who remember? What is the space between dura mater and vertebral canal? Epidural space. And what takes place in this epidural space? Here it is fat and what? And venous plexus. Fat tissue and venous plexus in epidural space. But in skull, dura mater fused with bones without space. Here it is, there is no space between dura mater and bones. There is no epidural space in skull is absent. And only in some places, for example here in this place, we can see space between dura mater and bone. It is two layers of dura mater the same fused together. And we can see space between two layers of dura mater here. This is falx cerebri, and this sinus, oh, here it is, between falx cerebri and bones. Here it is. We have, who remember what is the name of this sinus? Sagittalis superior. That is superior sagittal sinus. Here, superior sagittal sinus. And what is the name of this sinus? Between two layers of dura mater, inferior sagittal sinus. Here it is sinus sagittalis superior, and in this place sinus sagittalis inferior. Sinus sagittalis inferior only inside of dura mater, and sinus sagittalis superior between dura mater and bones. And one another sinus, it forms only with the help of dura mater. That is, look here, inferior sagittal sinus, then continues into straight sinus, sinus rectus. And this sinus is between falx cerebri and tentorium cerebelli. Look here. In the hemisphere, here it is a hemisphere of the brain, that is cerebellum, and between them we have tentorium cerebelli. This structure is tentorium cerebelli. Here it is hemisphere, and below of tentorium we have cerebellum. And now sinus rectus, that is sinus between falx cerebri and tentorium cerebelli. And this sinus, sinus rectus, straight sinus, it opens into confluence sinum in this place. The same like superior sagittal sinus, it also goes to confluence. And from confluence sinum, one way goes to transverse sinus, and transverse sinus continues into sigmoid sinus, and sigmoid sinus goes to jugular foramen, and here it is beginning of internal jugular vein. Another way from confluence, that is occipital sinus. Occipital sinus goes to foramen magnum and separates into sinus marginalis, marginal sinus. Sinus marginalis goes to, it surrounds foramen magnum and opens into sigmoid sinus or directly into jugular foramen. Next sinus, here it is, sinus sphenoparietalis, here and here, along of lesser veins of sphenoid bone. Sinus sphenoparietalis continues into sinus cavernosus, here and here. Sinus cavernosus joined one with another with the help of sinus intercavernosus, anterior and posterior. Then sinus cavernosus, from sinus cavernosus, one way directly into sinus petrosus inferior and jugular foramen, or sinus petrosus superior, sigmoid sinus and jugular foramen. This sinus is sinus sphenoparietalis, here it is sinus cavernosus, anterior and posterior intercavernous sinus, and that is all. Petrosal sinus and sigmoid sinus, impossible to see, necessary to remove tentorium cerebelli if we want to see another sinuses. And here it is superior sagittal sinus, inferior sagittal, sinus rectus, and transverse sinus here and here. That is all what we can see in this preparate. You should know sinuses in preparate and in skull. And now, we already said that cerebrospinal fluid goes to, look here, that is hemisphere, here it is pia mater, that is arachnoidea, and cerebrospinal fluid goes to subarachnoid space. And arachnoidea, it grows through dura mater and goes to sinuses. And this place has name granulations of arachnoidea. And these granulations grows through dura mater and opens into sinuses. That is why, with the help of granulations, cerebrospinal fluid from subarachnoid space goes to sinuses mixed here with venous blood and go away from skull. That is circulation of cerebrospinal fluid and sinuses. Then, subarachnoid space, if you remember in spinal cord, that is spinal cord, here it is arachnoidea, here it is pia mater, and in lower part of vertebral canal, subarachnoid space dilates and makes cisterna. Who remember what is this cisterna? Cisterna terminalis. That is dilation of subarachnoid space in spinal cord. And subarachnoid space in brain The same has some cisterns. One of them is cisterna chiasmatis in front of optic chiasma. Next is cisterna interpeduncularis between peduncles of the brain. Next, that is cisterna cerebella medullaris between cerebellum and medulla oblongata here. These three cisterns, they are unpaired. Cisterna chiasmatis, cisterna interpeduncularis, and cisterna cerebella medullaris, they are unpaired. And one pair, that is cisterna fossa lateralis. Fossa lateralis, that is placed on inferior surface of frontal lobe where sulcus lateralis start, that is beginning of sulcus lateralis. And in this place we have cisterna fossa lateralis. This is paired cistern, cisterna fossa lateralis. That is why total number of cisterns, they are 5. Paired cisterna lateralis, then cisterna chiasmatis, interpeduncularis, and cerebella medullaris. And last, blood supply of brain. Blood supply of brain, you already know because in previous semester you studied arteries of the brain. 2 vertebral arteries, arteria vertebralis, right and left vertebral arteries, join together and forms arteria basilaris. And arteria basilaris then subdivides into arteria cerebri posterior. Arteria cerebri posterior. The same arteria basilaris gives arteria cerebelli superior, arteria cerebelli inferior anterior, and from vertebral artery we have arteria cerebelli inferior posterior. Here it is short arteries to the pons, arteria pontis. These two, arteria spinalis anterior and paired arteria spinalis posterior. Then internal carotid artery, arteria carotis interna, and arteria carotis interna, it gives arteria cerebri media, arteria cerebri anterior, cerebri media, cerebri anterior. Here it is anterior communicating artery, arteria communicans anterior, and arteria communicans posterior. And it gives arteria choroidea posterior, which participate in choroid plexus. Arteria choroidea posterior. That is really cycle. It is not new information, but next time you should answer that arteria cerebri anterior, that is arteria cerebri anterior, it supplies medial surface of hemisphere till sulcus. What is this sulcus? Sulcus parieto accipitalis. All medial surface till sulcus parieto accipitalis. The same it supplies superior parietal lobule, upper part of gyrus postcentralis, gyrus precentralis, and gyrus frontalis superior. And here it is gyrus rectus on inferior surface. All of these structures receive blood from arteria cerebri anterior. Now, arteria cerebri posterior, it supplies occipital lobe, lobus occipitalis. And arteria cerebri media supplies all another structure. That is, here it is arteria cerebri media, and it supplies frontal lobe, parietal, temporal lobe, all another structures receive blood from arteria cerebri media. Cerebellum has 3 arteries, superior cerebellar artery and 2 inferior, anterior and posterior. That is cerebelli inferior anterior, and this one arteria cerebelli inferior posterior. Spinal cord receives blood from three spinal arteries, arteria spinalis anterior and arteria spinalis posterior. And these three spinal arteries, arteria spinalis, in cervical department makes anastomosis with vertebral artery, in thoracic department makes anastomosis with arteria intercostalis posterior, and in lumbar department makes anastomosis with arteria lumbalis. That is blood supply of the spinal cord. This diagram is the same, you need to draw this and these two diagrams next time. And last, give me preparates for demonstration. Thank you. That is lateral ventricle, here it is anterior horn, central part, posterior horn and inferior horn. Anterior horn of the left hemisphere or left ventricle separates from anterior horn on the right ventricle with the help of septum pellucidum, that is transparent septum, lateral wall, that is head of nucleus caudatus, and superiorly corpus callosum. Now, central part, inferiorly, that is dorsal surface of thalamus, and here it is body of nucleus caudatus, superiorly corpus callosum. Posterior horn, middle wall has calcar avis, that is eminence from sulcus calcarinus, calcar avis, and superiorly here tapetum, that is fibers of corpus callosum. And inferior horn, anteriorly and laterally, here it is tail of nucleus caudatus, then hypocamp medially, and inferiorly impossible to see, eminentia collateralis. This is fornix, and posteriorly fornix continues into crura fornicis, and crura fornicis attached to hypocamp and makes fimbria hypocampi. They are fimbria hypocampi. And right fornix joined with left fornix with the help of commissura fornicis. It is joined right and left fornix, one with another. Then, here it is head of nucleus caudatus, here it is thalamus, and this is nucleus lentiformis, that is cortex of insula, and this narrow part of gray matter, that is claustrum, that is basal nuclei. Then here it is optic chiasma, and in front of optic chiasma this is cisterna chiasmatis. This is peduncles of the brain, and between them cisterna interpeduncularis. Here it is medulla oblongata and cerebellum, and between them this cisterna cerebella medullaris. And in the beginning of sulcus lateralis, here and here, this is fossa lateralis, this and this. And here we have cisterna fossa lateralis. Here we can see that is internal carotid artery, it gives arteria cerebri media, this is cerebri media. Here it is arteria cerebri anterior, here it is the same arteria cerebri anterior, and between them this is arteria communicans anterior, between right and left anterior cerebral artery. Here it is arteria basilaris, it gives arteria cerebri posterior, and this is arteria cerebellis superior, and here arteria cerebri posterior, and that is terminal end of arteria basilaris. Well, that is all. Your questions? Today that is all.